Hey, I'm Maverick, and I'm also whatever I put my head on in editing. Today, I want to talk about a sentiment that I've seen a lot in the Genshin community, with YouTubers and with streamers and with commenters and on Reddit and on Twitter and on bathroom stalls, pretty much everywhere. And that sentiment is that Genshin doesn't have a whole lot of content, and that 1.6 is really just filler content. So I want to talk about that today and what even filler content means. Also, I want to make it clear that I'm not singling out any YouTuber or streamer or anybody. That this is strictly just about the arguments and not about any individual. I like all of the content creators in the community, and the community is generally great. So first, let's look at the content that's in Genshin.
Before I directly tackle any arguments, subscribe. No, seriously, subscribe and I'll give you whatever this is. I'll give you this thing on the screen. Oh, and also like too, because the algorithm is fucking shit. So let's lay the groundwork for the type of content that Genshin pushes and what kind of features that the game currently offers. In my patch 1.6 analysis, I decided to divide it into 3 categories, those being world, story, and combat. And this is because I think the content in the game can be separated like this. So let's put the content into these containers. We have world, which includes the areas of the game, non-combat focused events, and non-combat additions to the game. So here we've got things like the Serenity Pot, co-op events like the Wonderland, general exploration, and areas of the game like Dragonspine and the new Archipelago. Story should be clear. It includes story-focused content such as the main story, Archon quests, and hangout events. And finally, combat includes just Timmy. That's it. Combat is combat-focused events, character releases and their kits, domains, and the Spiral Abyss. If there's any type of content that I'm missing here, let me know in the comments, but I think we've got the gist, right? Genshin Impact is different in that it isn't a purely combat-focused game. While a lot of components in the game are centered around combat, that does not then mean that the focus of the game is combat. And I think with how the game has been updating over these last 8 months, that should be clear now. Genshin Impact is a world, and when I say that, I don't just mean that it's an open world game. What I mean is that it's a mesh of gameplay styles. That it's a game that's meant to appeal to a wide variety of people. People who play just for the world and story, or people who play just for the combat, or people who play just to explore and have some fun. Now, we can have a conversation about the balance of those attributes, and who the game should be appealing to, which we're about to, but I wanted to make it clear that some people's image of this game isn't exactly what the game is, and it often ignores the larger purpose of the game in general.
So let's talk about patch 1.6. I saw people initially not enjoying the live stream for 1.6, which kind of surprised me. As a short summary of the patch, which I've got a video on if you want to see my full in-depth thoughts on it, it includes pretty much every type of content that this game can offer. It overall seems like a very well-rounded patch, but there's one piece of information that it seems Genshin has been trying to keep secret, and that's that Amber's bad. She's just not good. I'm kidding. I'm not about that, but that's not the piece of information I want to talk about. It's the fact that the Archipelago area may actually be limited.
Now, at the moment, this information is kinda still up in the air. The only information I can find on this is through leakers and through a random PlayStation blog post. So I just want to get this out of the way. If this is true, it's an incredible bummer. The area looks beautiful, and I absolutely love the idea of having an area to just sail around in whenever I want. And while I don't think that the boat will just be removed entirely, even if the area is, as I think those mechanics will be included when Inazuma is, it's still very sad if a beautiful area is just strictly removed from the game. I think especially so if you're someone who starts the game later, as this wouldn't just be a removal of, say, an event, but also an area to explore and part of the world. But I also think that we can change our mindsets on this too, that this thing can just be viewed as an event, a huge event, but as an event in general, and I think that's how Genshin wants us to think of the Archipelago. Well, that's how they would want us to think of the Archipelago if they told us that it was limited, which we've only gotten a PlayStation blog post. Jesus Christ, Mihoyo, get your shit together.
Let's also talk about how Mihoyo has handled this potential information. So if it is true, Mihoyo just decided to not include it in the 1.6 live stream. And they definitely don't, because I went back and watched all of the portions of the live stream that have to do with the archipelago, and there's no mention of it. And that's why it still makes me think that maybe the area really isn't limited. Or if it is, it seems that they're hiding that information intentionally, except on a PlayStation blog post. So that's why I thought that the rumors were initially untrue, because the live stream just didn't mention it at all. But then I saw the PlayStation blog post. So it seems that if it is true, Mihoyo is just trying to hide the information so that gamers don't get initially mad about it. But I mean, people are gonna find out about it anyway. And I mean, for like the 12 people that saw the PlayStation blog post, they know now too. If it is true that this area is going to be limited and they decided to not include that in the patch 1.6 live stream, that's really unacceptable and they need to do better. Overall, it's just terrible communication with Mihoyo, which is odd because they've generally been pretty good about that. But that aside, let's look at the actual content of the patch itself and decide whether or not it's filler content.
Well, what is filler content for a live service game like Genshin? Well, I'd personally say it's reruns, right? To me, filler content for gacha games and MMOs is content that is reused and not new. So obviously that definition would mean that this patch isn't filler, right? Now, I can see some people saying that it's filler because it's potentially only for a limited time, and while that is a total bummer like I said, we also have to look at what that would actually mean. That would mean the limited time areas are filler, right? So then why wouldn't limited time events fit into that as well? So that would mean all events are filler, right? Since all events are limited time. And any addition to the game is filler too, unless it stays around forever. I think that definition makes the word filler mean way too much. It would just be way too broad at that point. I'm just as annoyed as the next guy if the archipelago is limited, but I don't then think that that means that it's filler content. Again, I'm starting to think of the islands as just a huge event, and I do personally like more effort put into event content in general. Now, I can hear the question being, well, why can't they just keep the area around? And it might have a simple answer, and that answer might just be because of the phone platform, but again, we don't know this, so I don't want to delve too far into that theory, at least not for now. And speaking of disappointment, let's talk about the general disappointment from streamers since the game's release. Now, let me get this out of the way. I don't disagree with them, but I also don't think that their complaints apply to the general audience of this game.
I think the general complaint in this area is that the game doesn't have enough exciting content. Like content that is exciting for when you're streaming or for making content over it. So I think that since you can beat the Abyss in like an hour, especially if you spent money on the game, and since combat-focused events rarely come around, at least right now, a lot of streamers and YouTubers are kind of annoyed because it's become more difficult to create content for this game without Genshin Impact giving things that are easier to make content on. And I think I can understand that frustration. If you really did start your content on build and on the combat in the game, thinking that the combat would be the general focus of the game, it definitely is kind of annoying that the game just isn't leaning into that almost at all. I mean, we are going to get combat-focused events, but there really isn't a lot of repeatable, difficult content in the game. Again, Spiral Abyss does exist, but you can beat it in like an hour once you've figured out how it works. But again, I don't think that this game is just the combat. That's why I've split the content of this game into 3 sections, because I do think that combat is important, but I don't think that it's all that this game has to offer or is currently offering. So while I feel for a lot of content creators, and I do think that Mihoyo needs to listen to them since streamers and YouTubers are a lifeblood for this game, I don't think that that then means that Mihoyo needs to change their design sensibilities, because I do like the direction that this game is going in. I just think that they need to put a little more focus on combat so that streamers and YouTubers can have difficult content to actually complete and make content over. So, moral of the story is this. Genshin Impact does have a lot of content, and it focuses on things like the world and characters and story quite a bit. More so than I think a lot of people initially thought that it would. This has resulted in streamers and YouTubers having a hard time in making content, and if not even that, just being a little annoyed that the combat focus hasn't been the focus of the game. And while I feel for these people, I think that Mihoyo needs to continue on the route that they're going, but also fill up some gaps in terms of the repeatable combat in the game. As for patch 1.6, I'm definitely bummed if the archipelago is limited, but I'll personally just think of it as a large event area if that's the case. And while I would be bummed if the area was limited, that then doesn't mean that the area is somehow filler content, because I then think that that would include events, and I don't agree with that. But the content in this game is complex, and I think a lot of people have issues that I generally agree with. But I also think that we need to look at this game with a more broad lens and look at all of the type of content that this game offers, not strictly the combat. Oh, and I also think that Mihoyo needs to do a better job if this area is limited, and they needed to have included that in their live stream. And it's kind of ridiculous that they didn't, if it's true. So, thank you for watching. I appreciate you if you made it to the end. You can check out the rest of my videos on this channel. I'm trying to upload 3 times a week, so make sure to subscribe to see more. I also have a channel dedicated to just anime and gaming in general, so if you want to check that out, the link will be in the description and on the end card. Regardless, thank you for watching. Also, I'm Amber.